our history. Buildings and people and memories and dreams. Who better to tell us than those who were there? There's so much to learn from the stories they'll share. Living history. Living history.
Hello and welcome to Living History with Ted Goldsboro. We're here once again with Max Buten. Max grew up in Lower Merion, lived on North Bowman Avenue. His family was in the paint business, had several stores in the Philadelphia and suburban Philadelphia area. We spoke about his growing up in Merion, attending the Kinwood Elementary School and Kinwood and Lower Merion High School. We talked about World War II, and we talked about the Wedgwood collection that your father started and had quite a collection of, and a display at your home on North Bowman Avenue. Let's talk some more about that collection. Now, the money that it took for your family to buy these things came out of the paint profits.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Could you tell me what the significance of this is?
Yeah. I have a couple of pieces to show and a couple of pictures. This is something that the Wedgwood Company gave us when we were there in 1951. It's got there was a mug for each of us with a name and a birth date. And I think this is the first time I've ever drunk from it.
A momentous occasion.
It is a momentous occasion. I also have this little plaque which was made for the Buten Museum of Wedgwood. It says on the back, 1972, Mr. and Mrs. Harry M. Buten, founders. Mm-hmm. Now, you looked at this, and you said, is it Bess and Harry?
True or that.
Which is really funny, because that's what my sister calls it, because she thinks it looks like Bess and Harry. It looks somewhat like my father, but doesn't look like my mother at all.
Okay. And who were Bess and Harry?
Oh, Bess and Harry, of course, is Harry Truman was the president when, after that night on my way home from Hebrew school when Franklin Roosevelt died in 1945 till 7 years later, I think. And Bess was his wife.
Okay.
And
now, what happened to the Buten collection?
So, the collection, we got the New York Wedgwood Society. Nobody in Philadelphia seemed to want it, and the New York Wedgwood Society arranged for it to go to the Nassau County, who said they would put it on sale in Sands Point in Long Island.
On sale?
On exhibit. Did I say sale?
You did.
Ooh.
Okay.
On exhibit, which they did in some halfway manner. They never cataloged it and so forth. So they really didn't do what they were supposed to do, and Nassau County, despite being very wealthy, was pretty broke, the county itself. It was not AAA like Lower Merion. So then the New York Wedgwood Society eventually arranged to move it to the Birmingham Museum of Art in Alabama, which is a beautiful place, the museum, and has a really nice display, much better than I've ever seen pottery displayed anywhere.
Why do you think?
So it's there.
Why do you think your father and mother took an interest in Wedgwood? You know, what is it about Wedgwood?
My father was a collector, but was not a top-end collector. Did not buy the very best of things. Couldn't afford them. Bought things that were out of style Wedgwood was very much out of style when he started. Some of the items still are very much out of style. Some are very hot. It was something that's very useful, almost universally available, or at least it was in all the antique stores all over the world, because the Wedgwood Company had been in business for 200 years and had sold lots and lots. Josiah Wedgwood I was a prime member of the Industrial Revolution in England. He was, besides being Charles Darwin's relative by marriage, the Wedgwoods and the Darwins intermarried. He was one of the people in the Moonlight Society, or whatever they called it, that meant on the full moon nights when they could travel about out in the potteries in Birmingham, England, and came up with lots of things. The steam engine is one of their things, and so forth and so on. Wedgwood was particularly interested in transportation because he was out where the clay was making his pottery, and he had to get it to the market in London. So he promoted canals, which is another story for another day in another country, from Lower Merion, and railroads too, I think.
I don't think
why Wedgwood?
Yeah.
Oh, you like the looks of it. I guess it was available.
Now, to amass this collection, how did he do that? Where would he get the pieces?
He would get most of them from antique stores. Whenever he went, he would ask if there was any Wedgwood, and if they would say no, he would say any English china, and he would say any blue and white stuff, for which Wedgwood is most famous. He bought a lot of Wedgwood's factory rejects to sell in the store in the Buten Museum. They came in great big barrels that I always imagined were as big as those old putty barrels, or even bigger. And he promoted the ware, and therefore the company, so they helped him a little. And of course, they're not in good shape either. They've been bought out, and the parent company is now. People aren't using fancy china anymore. So,
tell me about the Birmingham. I'll close this out by the Birmingham installation, or your family went down.
Well, we went down last November to the opening of the exhibit. It's not like the Buten Museum where everything is stacked up next to each other, which is one of the neat things about it. Everything is separate, and you can see each piece one at a time. You can look at something and see it. And at the same time, when we were there, they had the pieces not on exhibit in a big room of its own, with shelving all around and pieces all together. They had sorted it by what it looked like, pretty much, and so we didn't have where we had in Merion, where there were pieces in the basement that were hidden away, and there were pieces on the third floor in a cabinet, and there were books in the attic. And here everything was just laid out properly.
Now, does your family still own the collection?
We own some of the pieces. We had given some to the Buten Museum, and some, I guess we never gave any to Nassau County. But we are in the process of giving it all to Birmingham.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your honeymoon, you and Gloria, your wife.
Gloria and I got married in November of 1959. Our anniversary is on Monday. And we had 2 honeymoons. Gloria was teaching school, and I was working and going to Penn for an MBA. And so first we went for Thanksgiving week to New York. I ordered a fine $20 room at the Plaza, and we got one facing the air shaft, and the only time we saw the sun is when it was shining on the windows across the air shaft.
Honeymoon suite.
The honeymoon suite it was not. Then at Christmas time we went to Jamaica and Haiti.
Wow.
Where I had also been with my parents. And so soon we started to have a family, and eventually when my oldest son was 3, we made our first trip to Europe, where the dollar was, at a time when the dollar was very high and European currencies were much lower. We've been traveling ever since. We've gone to all the continents except Australia and Antarctica, and most of them several times. We're about to take our second trip around the world. Gloria plans it all and makes all the arrangements, and I get to complain. And according to her, I complain too much.
About how long would these trips be in time?
Well, this one will be something like 6 weeks. And I think last year we did essentially the same trip for 5 weeks. And in my retirement times, I got plenty of time. The only outfit that misses me is the Historical Society, and they.
Well, let's talk about.
So I take a cut and pay.
Yeah, let's talk about the Historical Society, since you mentioned it. What do you do for the Historical Society? What is the Historical Society?
The Historical Society preserves Lower Merion's history for the present, and I've started the idea of preserving the present for the future, which means basically you and I take pictures of buildings in the township that are to be demolished. La Ronda was a very famous one, but mostly it's individual houses which are 50 years old, sometimes much older, and are either not in good shape or not in good design or not very big, and get torn down and nice big ones are built. Well, at least that's what happened when it was happening a couple years ago when we started. Now, not much is happening, but enough to keep us active, and we are now working with Bob McCormick in the older black and white negatives, really, that we were given by Bob Swartz, the photographer in Ardmore, which has all sorts of interesting things. And we keep looking and finding more and more, and getting involved, not actively involved, but we get to know everybody in the township staff because they're involved in these things one way or another, and so we find out what's going on from them. Our headquarters is in the Academy, which is the 1812 school building next to Ballackinwood Middle School. This is a picture of it with Ted Goldsboro and his bicycle, as that's the way he usually commutes there. It's a nice old building, which the school board has updated a couple times, so it's in good shape. One of the things that we have done is this booklet for the 325th anniversary of the first Welsh settlement in Narberth. I'm proud to say that these pictures of the seal that William Penn used, the pictures were taken by me. So it's nice to have pictures published in a good way like this.
Other than the Historical Society, what other activities have you been involved with?
I've been involved for a long time in the Gladwin Montessori School, for originally the Children's House, which is in this 1880s building that was the Gladwin Elementary School, it was the Merion Square Elementary School. When they closed it, they did so because they had built a new Gladwin School on the other side of the park there. It's a nifty school for children from 2 to 12, and I highly recommend it to you all. Of course, if you're older than 12, you can't go.
Some of your grandchildren went there.
Excuse me. One of my sons went there, and all the way from preschool through 6th grade, and then his son and daughter have gone to a Montessori school in Cambridge, Mass. So I'm very much in favor of their system, which involves actually touching things to understand them, and using things in as long as you need to, and not a bell ringing every 40 minutes to go off to the next class.
Didn't you work on a website for them?
Yeah, I did their website. I have a website for my own travel pictures, and I have lots of other pictures on the web in different places. If you go to buten.net, you'll find a link to them all, and pictures of some of my grandchildren.
Some other group pictures
Let's
here.
see what you have here. Oh boy. In 1970, I was elected president of the, what was it called then? The Paint and Wallpaper Association of America, or maybe at that time it changed to the National Decorating Products Association, and now it is a different name also. So at that time they took a picture of us family members who were running the business at that time to publish in their magazine. I'm in the middle in the glasses, along with, let's see, my uncle, one cousin, and 3 cousins-in-law.
Mm-hmm. And they were all Buten Paint Company?
They were all Buten executives at that time, yep.
When you sold the business, they all left? Or did some of them stay on with Duran? Or
by that time, Ty Steinberg was the president, and 2 of his sons were promised jobs with Duran, and they were given menial jobs, and they worked for not more than a couple of years. The rest of us are all retired.
And how about that shop?
Then at the convention at which I was elected, or which I ended my term, they gave me a award or reward, a gift, and thanks for my service. And the gift that I chose was a bicycle. I had not ridden a bicycle as an adult until then. So they gave me this one. They fixed it up as Buten paint delivery, and somehow knowing that my grandfather rode a bicycle in his business, and it was a different business by this time. And here I am in my sideburns and my tie that had fluorescent ink on it. And here's Gloria with her long hair and her long eyelashes and her long eyebrows. And it's just a remembrance of the time, along with Bob Pettit, who was the head of the association at that time. The seat that held up the paint sign stayed on there until my oldest son, the one that's facing the wrong way, started to rock it. And it came off as soon as we got home that day. That was scary.
Lower Merion Library Association.
Yeah, when was I president of that? I started with the Belmont Hills Library and became head of the Library Association, which at least nominally ran the libraries in Lower Merion at that time. Later I became president of the Belmont Hills Library, and we went through budget fights like they're going on now, and the library system has continued to grow. It's one of the best in the country, and it's not only books now, but also, well, we had movies then. We don't have movies anymore, but we have DVDs and CDs and online books and all sorts of things. So it's a great source.
The Alzheimer's, what do you do for them?
Well, fortunately, I don't have the disease. My mother and her sister did, but I've been in what they call a normal control, which means they do tests on me to see what happens to normal people. I know that I'm getting different in certain areas than I was when I was younger. Probably this show has demonstrated that I have some trouble remembering names and specific words. Well, I haven't gotten to the stage where my mother was, where she said she would operate in two ways. Either would she would say to her audience, "You know what this is," and she would expect them to say it's a cup, which they did. And the other way was to put a label on the bottom of the cup that says "cup." So she would pick it up and look at it and be able to talk about it. So I go at least once a year, and generally more often, for tests of one sort or another, which involve telling a story or remembering a story that they tell me about a poor lady from Chicago or Boston on the south side who was robbed of $40 and so forth and so on.
To test your recollections.
Your recollection. And most of the questions are pretty silly for me because I don't have Alzheimer's disease. But I go through them. And then there are tests. They give me a PET scan and a CAT scan and take a sample of spinal fluid. That seems to be the best indicator, the best source for differentiating people who have Alzheimer's, other than slicing open the brain, which is not generally done. It's a terrible disease which will afflict almost everybody's families as the average age and people in this country gets older. And I'm glad to help with it.
You did that because of your mother's, or?
I got started in it, I guess because of my mother, yes. I started with through the people doing brain research at Bryn Mawr College.
Well, I think that wraps it up, Max, unless you can think of something else.
Well, I should tell the story how I got involved with how you got me involved with the Historical Society. One day I was bicycling through Kenwood and I got a flat tire. I bicycled a little further on and I got another flat tire. And to my great surprise, who came biking by but Ted Goldsboro. So I said, gee, what can you do for me, Ted? And you went home and got your car and it was a station wagon.
Dodge Dart station wagon.
Dodge Dart, and put my bike in the back of your car, and you took me home. And on the way, you said, Max, there's something you could do for the Historical Society. And I said, well, I better say yes, no matter what it is. But it was only to take a picture of a building up the street on Conshohocken State Road. So I went over there and took the picture, and you said, well, there's one other thing you'd like to, after I showed it to you, you said, there's one other thing I'd like you to do, is to take a picture of the buildings on Rock Hill Road. The township's going to tear that down and make it a straight road. And that's been on the plans for years, and now they're getting around to really doing it. So would you go there and take pictures of these houses? Well, I went out every Sunday that winter, I think, and took pictures of every house and every building there, which is not that many. And now it's 10 years later, and all the houses are still there, and all the buildings are still there, and the street hasn't been changed, and there have been 2 sets of plans since then, and we have all those books. Well, I said, well, after that I got to be thinking, it said, well, this is about to go away. We should have a record of what else is going away. So we started to get word from the township of what was to be torn down and taking pictures of each of them. And I think we've gotten pictures of every building that's been torn down in the township for all that period.
About 5 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
where are those pictures available to the public?
Ah, yes. They are available on the Historic Society's website, lowermerionhistory.org, and click where it says buildings, and you will be led to them. They're arranged by address, and if your house has been torn down and it's not on there, it will be soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's anything else, Max?
No, I thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
I think we've had enough.
Thank you.
And I hope it doesn't break anybody's television watching it.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.